official city business.
Oh,
Yeah, quiet.
I know where I left you, so don't say.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you for your indulgence. So I suppose I am calling this meeting of the Temecula City Council to order. And we want to thank Abraham Castro. Stand up, Abraham. Thank you very much for the lovely prelude music. And you can actually hear it in the back, so I actually got to hear it. So thank you very much. And who is that I see behind the piano? Is that Miss Susan Miyamoto? Thank you, Susan. So tonight we have Pastor Kyle Curry of the Reliance Church for our invocation, and flag salute will be by Councilmember Roberts. So if you'd please stand for our invocation. Good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you? Let us pray. Father God, we are so thankful to live in Temecula. Lord, what a beautiful city you've created for us. And Lord, we just ask for your blessing upon it. God, we pray that you give wisdom and discernment to the city council and those that make decisions for our community. God, would you give them wisdom? Would you bless them? Would you bless their time with their families? Lord, as they're taking time away from their families tonight, even to meet. God, would you go before us? God, would you give us that extra push that we need to make those decisions that are sometimes tough or sometimes difficult. God, will we be known in our community and throughout the valley as a city that is strong in our integrity. Lord, will we be not compromising? God, would we be led by you? And God, would you bless our city? Lord, we thank you for what an amazing opportunity that we have just to be in Temecula. Lord, and would you please go before us? Would you go before this meeting? And would you give us wisdom and discernment to those who are making decisions financially or not financially with your city, God? And would you just continue to push us on and push us forward, Lord, as the community that's on the cutting edge, Lord. And God, we just love you and we thank you and we pray these things in your name. Amen.
and
Please turn and face the flag, and let's salute the wonderful flag that we all love. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And you'll notice we have an empty seat. Councilmember Washington is taking a well-deserved break from retirement, on vacation, I think. So could we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Comachero,
here.
Councilmember Nagar,
I am here.
Councilmember Roberts,
Here.
Councilmember Washington is absent, and Mayor Edwards.
I'm here. So we'll move on to public comments. And do we have any comments?
Yes, we have 3.
Okay, we have 3. A total of 30 minutes is provided so members of the public may address the city council on items that appear within the consent calendar or a matter not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. If the speaker chooses to address the city council on an item listed on the consent calendar or a matter not listed on the agenda, a request to speak form must be filled out and filed with the city clerk prior to the city council addressing public comments and the consent calendar. Once the speaker is called to speak, please come forward and state your name for the record. For all public hearing or council business items on the agenda, a request to speak form must be filed with the city clerk prior to the city council addressing that item. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. So could we have our first speaker, please?
First speaker is Patrice Lines, to be followed by Chuck Rear.
Good evening, Ms. Lyons.
I'm here to talk about the law. California Public Resources Code, Section 2690 et sequitur, known as the Seismic Hazard Mapping Act, governs the exercise of city responsibilities to identify and mitigate seismic hazards to protect public health and safety. Article 10, Seismic Hazards Mapping Regulations, Section 3720 through 3725 addresses items required before any project can be approved, separate from CEQA. After reading through all documents posted for the proposed housing for Shearwater Creek on Pujol Street, which is about 2 blocks from the Temecula Community Pantry, I did not find any documents showing a certified engineering geologist or a registered civil engineer from the planning department conducting a review or signed off on such a review before the Planning Commission approved the project. The law states under Section 3724, Part C, that prior to approving the project, the lead agency shall independently review the geotechnical report, and that such reviews shall be conducted by a certified engineering geologist or registered civil engineer having complete competence in the field of seismic hazard evaluation and mitigation. The law states under Section 3725 that the lead agency may determine that public safety is adequately protected and no mitigation is required. Shearwater Creek Housing, aka Ambient Communities, was approved and given a mitigated negative declaration by this city. As such, you have violated several areas of the law by promoting illegal agency activity to happen regarding project promotions and approvals contrary to the general welfare, health, and safety of the citizenry and voters of Temecula. Promoting any and all projects that have not been statutorily and lawfully administered within the state of California is against the law. Additionally, you are violating Section 6 of Riverside County's Ordinance 547 as it relates to Section 1 and Section 2C. One last thing, the Temecula General Plan Public Safety Section for seismic hazards, the map incorrectly lists the fault names as the Elsinore Fault, as well as errors of omission for not listing the various multiple strands of the Willard Fault, Wildemar Fault, and Wolf Gravens, with its multiple active fault strands as well. What else is incorrect or illegal as it
Ms.
pertains
Lyons,
to
you
the
need to summarize.
promotion of any and all projects located in and around the known geologic hazard zones? Thank you.
Mr. Comachero, you have a comment?
Yeah, can I ask a question of our Community Development Director, Armando? I can't imagine any project ever coming before the city or any other jurisdiction that didn't have a geotechnical report. Can you address that? Did we have a geotechnical report on this particular project?
You're correct. We did do a geotechnical report on the project, and it was analyzed appropriately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Chuck Rear, to be followed by Tom Binding.
Mr. Rear, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine. My name is Chuck Rear. I've been here many times. I've got one pet peeve. When I was a young person, more years ago than I want to admit, we were taught to ride our bicycles on the wrong side of the street so you could see the opposing traffic coming at you. Now they've got these bicycle lanes with traffic, but people still ride on the sidewalks. And there's nothing more alarming to be walking down the street and have some idiot come whizzing by you, and it scares the poop right out of you. And I wish they'd start enforcing some of these laws, because it's totally wrong. With that, bye.
Thank you, Mr. Rear.
Tom Binding, and he is our final public comment speaker.
Mr. Vining.
Citizens of Temecula, I was one of the leaders of a group that objected to the rescue mission at Bridge Housing's summer house development. We called the group Spartacus. In answer to our peaceful protest and lawful dissent, we were met with verbal and physical assaults, slander, libel, and anonymous death threats. My son-in-law was targeted as the group's leader and punished as such. This poster, with his name, address, and phone number, was created from a video capture by a city camera in the council chamber. It was discovered in the city records and obtained through a public records request. This unlawful release of a citizen's private information was circulated by email to other citizens, and the source of the poster was unknown. But news alert, a document has just been handed me that sheds light on part of the mystery. This email was given to me by former council candidate Paul Jacobs. It was sent to him on August 28, 2009, at which time he was a columnist at the Californian. The subject is Temecula resident contact info. It's addressed to T. Edwards at opto22.com and CC'd to Jacobs, 4 other opinion writers at the Californian, a reporter at the Press Enterprise, and the editor of the Californian. Attached was the PDF file of what I call the wanted poster of my son-in-law. The sender of the email is marianne.edwards@citycouncil.org. According to the PDF document properties, it was created on a computer owned by Bridge Housing, and the author is identified. Our group's emails were intercepted and rewritten, forged with vile language calculated to portray us as hate-filled and menacing. My son-in-law's name and phone number were forged to this disgusting letter and then distributed by email. Both the original and the forgeries were found in the city records received from multiple sources. My son-in-law began receiving so many threatening phone calls, he was forced to change his number. He received 2 anonymous threatening letters through the U.S. mail. This letter, postmarked August 31st, 2009, reads in part, Dear Spartacus, your identity is no longer a secret. Your full information will be released to Rancho Community Church members, as well as the letters to the editor of the California and Press Enterprises. Of course, by this date, his information had already been given to the press. On September 10th, another anonymous letter arrived, this one containing a death threat. This time, my son-in-law involved the police. He met with Riverside County Sheriff's Department Deputy Chafin, and after a quick investigation involving a phone call to a prominent stakeholder, the calls and letters stopped. There is a report on file at the Sheriff's Department, and there is a case number. What would you do if your children were threatened, bullied, and frightened just to further a political agenda? I don't know who forged those emails or wrote those letters, but this is going to the district attorney. And if he investigates, we will find out who wrote the letters, because the envelope, which is in a safety deposit box, was licked closed, and there is DNA on it. I'm here tonight because the truth has been hidden and shoved aside for too long. As George Washington said, truth will ultimately prevail where there are pains taken to bring it to light.
He's done. Okay, moving on to city council reports. And nobody's in the queue this evening?
I'm in the queue.
Oh, I'm not showing you.
There you are.
Oh, there you are. Okay, Mr. Nagar, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Real quick, I just wanted to show something to the citizens. City of Temecula was recognized with the Board of Supervisors this morning, along with National Autism Awareness Month. So I just wanted to compliment the Board of Supervisors, and in the resolution, they gave us a nice shout out for all the work that we've done here in Temecula and for our council forming the Southwest Riverside Autism Task Force. Mr. City Manager, can you find a nice, good, prominent place for this?
And were you there, Councilmember Nagar?
No, I wasn't able to go. I had a dental appointment this morning, but I did want to go.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Because you're the author, so thank you. Ms.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the council.
I just have a very brief comment. I recently got back from 8 or 9 days in China on private business, and boy, am I ever glad to be back home. But I wanted to relay a particular incident. There was a group that somehow, I'm not quite sure, knew that I was there. This was in the town of Kunming, which is about a 3-hour flight from Shanghai, and it's a resort town. And the gentleman was is the chairman of the Chinese Wine and Alcohol Committee. And you have to remember that everything in China is run by the Communist Party, and it's a very different system than what we have here. And they invited me to join them in their monthly meeting concerning wine and alcohol. And it was quite an honor, and although I felt a little sheepish because we met in the Senate chamber of the Communist Party, I felt very uneasy, I have to tell you. And the gentleman who was the chairman didn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Chinese, and he spoke through an interpreter. And he said he wanted to thank me and all Americans for the support that we provided to China during World War II when we sent the Flying Tigers over to defend their nation. It was a different time, a different place, but I have to tell you, political ideology aside, he put me at ease very, very quickly, and I thought that was a pretty nice thing for him to say. And so I'm relaying that to all of you, that thank you comes to all of us from China. So very interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Comachero. Any other comments? All right, then, we will move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted with one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the City Council request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Number 1, standard ordinance and resolution adoption procedure. Number 2, action minutes. Number 3, list of demands. Number 4, city treasurer's report as of February 28, 2014. Number 5, contract change order number 1 for the pavement rehabilitation program, Rancho California Road, Jefferson Avenue to Inez Road, PW 10-12.
Move the consent calendar.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second, so if you press your buttons, gentlemen. And that passes 4-1. So now we will recess to the City Council meeting to schedule meetings of the Temecula Community Services District, successor agency of the Temecula Redevelopment Agency, Temecula Housing Authority, and the Temecula Public Financing Authority.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I call this meeting of the Temecula Community Services District to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Directors Edwards,
Here.
Nagar,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Washington is absent, and President Comachero.
Here. Do we have any public comment under this portion?
Yes, we have one.
Okay, then the same rules apply. Please call that speaker.
Patrice Lyons,
Good evening again.
Good evening. Can you make that any clearer, please? Thank you. Tonight, I'd also like to talk about fault lines, liquefaction, landslides, and other geologic hazards within the greater Temecula area, and specifically on the hillside that is above Shearwater Creek housing. The picture you're looking at is the 1995 landslide at La Conchita, California, very close to Santa Barbara. Note the yellow and orange fault lines that are going through the hillside above La Conchita. They represent the Red Mountain Fault Zone and various strands of the active fault, of which there are at least 3. That area had a history of geologic hazards, and yet the city officials saw fit to approve housing right at the bottom of the hillside. The 1995 landslide destroyed or seriously damaged 36 houses and killed 10 people. The city installed steel and timber mitigation walls after 1995, but these were overtopped and tilted forward in places by the city's next landslide in 2005, according to the USGS geologist Randall Gibson. Now look at the purple-colored liquefaction areas all over the place on this hazard map provided by a licensed California geologist. The lavender hazard areas on the right side of the picture here are located in the Elsinore Trough of Temecula and underlie Shearwater Creek. Multi-density housing approved by the Planning Commission on April 2nd. The geology depth of materials, according to the most recent data from the Department of Mining and Geology, is anywhere from 340 to 1,000 meters deep. The ground is made up of alluvium, lake playa, and terrace deposits, unconsolidated and semi-consolidated, as well as marine deposits, which means it is very squishy to kind of squishy liquefaction in different places for very long way down the Earth's surface. The colored earthquakes shaking potential map shows the Temecula Valley in one of the second highest shaking colors possible, according to the latest shakeout map here. Lastly, I want to show you the ambient community's proposed housing outline in red. Nestled among the fault lines that go through the hillside within the red zones for Village West, just above the Shearwater Creek housing that was just approved, these multiple strands of the Willard Fault are very, very similar to display the fault lines that run across the hillside above the La Conchita landslide. A landslide is a movement of surface material down a slope. Although gravity acting on oversteepened slope is
Since your
the
time is
primary
up, please,
reason.
please summarize.
I will. So is the primary reason for a landslide. There are other factors that contribute to it. Soil slope weakening by heavy rains, earthquakes magnitude 4.0, and greater triggering landslides. How safe do you think new residents and the community pantry folks will feel about working at the bottom of a very steep hillside with liquefaction right under their feet?
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Your time is up. I will have
Knowing
to ask
there
you to
are
stop.
active fault lines running through the hillside, just about. Thank you.
Thank you, and as we mentioned earlier, there was appropriate earthwork, geotechnical studies done and by registered engineers, and everything that should have been done in conjunction with the approval of that project was done, so I appreciate that. Okay, do we have any other speakers?
No, we do not.
Thank you. We have a couple of items under consent calendar. Item 6 is consideration of approval of the action minutes of March 25th. Item 7, sponsorship agreement with American Cancer Society, Inc. for promotional services for Relay of Life at the request of Councilmember Washington. Those are the two items, and I might say on this item and on the previous council minutes, I am not abstaining because I've reviewed those, the videos, and I've reviewed the notes from those meetings, and therefore I am permitted to vote on them even though I was not physically here.
So move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. That motion does carry 4-0 with Mr. Washington absent. We have nothing further on the actual agenda. Mr. Hawkins, do we have a director's report tonight?
Oh, nothing tonight, just welcome back.
Wow, thank you. Mr. Adams, General Manager's report?
Nothing tonight, Mr. President.
Thank you. Do we have any director's reports? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn to the next regular meeting of April 22nd.
So moved.
We have a motion. I'll second. Any objection?
No.
Without objection, we stand adjourned.
All right, we're going to reconvene the Temecula City Council meeting. And on to item number 8, selection of alternate to serve on the Diaz Property Ad Hoc Subcommittee. And is there a recommendation, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, City Clerk will provide a brief staff report.
Yes, Madam Mayor and City Council, on January 14, committee assignments were approved by the City Council for the 2014 calendar year. Councilmember Nagar and Councilmember Washington were appointed to the Diaz Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Since being appointed to this committee in January, the business of Councilmember Washington was relocated, which is now within 500 feet of the subject property. Therefore, he is unable to continue serving as part of this committee. It is necessary to appoint another council member to this position.
Okay, any questions of staff? No? Any comments, public comments? None?
No, there are not.
Okay,
For this
recommendations, questions, discussion? I need some recommendations here, people.
I think we need Mr. Roberts on that committee.
What?
Mr. Roberts, do you have any desire to
I
serve
knew
on
that
the
was
Diaz
gonna
Road
hap-
property
I knew that was going to happen. Okay, I'll take it. That's
subcommittee? Okay.
That would be my motion.
Any objections? Motions from the floor?
fine. I'm retired, so I don't have too many conflicts.
No retired and no conflicts. All right, so I have a motion, and I'll second that motion. And we can cast our votes. Congratulations, Mr. Roberts, in anticipation of your unanimous approval, and it is unanimous.
Yep.
Councilmember Washington is absent. Congratulations. And moving on to item number 9, agreement with the Community Mission of Hope, a DBA of Rancho Community Church, to provide pantry operations and approve the Community Action Plan framework on homelessness at the request of Human Services Ad Hoc Subcommittee members Edwards and Nagar. Okay, and I know we have a staff report. And before we get there, there may be some question. Peter, could you just explain one more time why I do not have a conflict on this item?
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, Mayor Edwards does not have a conflict.
and may participate in this action. She is a member of the Rancho Community Church, but as a member and volunteer, that does not mean she has a financial interest in the church. She would if she were on the board of directors or an officer of the church, but since she isn't, that's not a source of conflict. Additionally, she is the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club, and that is located more than 500 feet from the land being leased to the Community Mission of Hope. Actually, it's closer to about 1,200 feet. So it's a significant distance and more than the 500 feet where there is a conflict assumed under the Political Reform Act. The city does own the property adjacent to the Boys and Girls Club, but that is not the subject of this license agreement, and the Community Mission of Hope does not have the right to use that land. So therefore, there's no conflict.
All right, thank you. Well, good evening,
Good evening.
misters. What do you have for us this evening?
Joint presentation
All right.
tonight. Tom and Jerry here. Item 9 is an agreement with the Community Mission of Hope, a DBA of Rancho Community Church, to provide pantry operations and approve the Community Action Plan framework on homelessness at the request of the Human Services Ad Hoc Subcommittee, members Mayor Edwards and Councilmember Nagar. You know, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, you know, I just realized that this week marks my 1 year with the City of Temecula.
Gosh,
Yeah.
it's gone fast. Congratulations, Kevin. Thank you.
We don't have any one-year pins, but
Yeah.
come back in another 4 years.
No, that's fine. You know, and I bring this up because, you know, initially a year ago, I was so impressed by the City Council and even the City Manager with your commitment to the core values, you know, in the Quality of Life Master Plan. And this evening's item, you know, really reinforces two of those core values, which is for a healthy and livable community and a responsive government. You know, Temecula is known for a high quality of life, which certainly begins with our commitment to public safety, but also for our spirit of care and compassion, which we in community services attempt to embody in everything we do. This spirit of care and compassion is regularly displayed for all residents, ranging from our senior and special needs populations to our everyday hardworking families and deserving active military and veterans. On October 2nd, 2010, October 12, 2010, the City of Temecula entered into an agreement with the Team Evangelical Assistant Ministries for Rancho Temecula, again a DBA of Team Community Pantry, to provide food and clothing distribution to the needy from the city-owned pantry location. The term of this agreement was for 5 years, and the rent for these facilities is $1 per year. During the term of the agreement, as you know, various social economic factors have occurred, not just nationally, but locally as well. According to the Riverside County 2013 homeless count and subpopulation survey, Temecula had 81 homeless persons. Now, 50 homeless, or 70%, were unsheltered, and 24 homeless, 30%, were sheltered. In addition to increased law enforcement activity, which the chief will cover later, through the problem-oriented policing or POP team efforts, county flood control, and park ranger deployment, the City Council directed staff to reevaluate current pantry services and to explore a proactive balance of compassion and resource leveraging, or wraparound services, in a more holistic approach to not just pantry operations, but the underlying issue of homelessness in our community. As such, on June 25, 2013, City Council provided staff direction to prepare an RFP for pantry services and authorize the city manager to terminate the lease with Team Community Pantry. On September 16th, the request for a proposal for pantry operation services was placed on Planet Bids. September 30th, we held an information conference at the pantry location on Pujol. And on October 31st, the deadline for submitting the proposals was experienced or realized. Now, one responsive proposal was submitted from the Community Mission of Hope, which included a partnership with Team Community Pantry. On November 19, 2013, a panel of city staff, which was comprised of human services personnel, senior services, park rangers, and a police representative, interviewed the Community Mission of Hope team. That was Scott Treadway, lead pastor and president of Rancho Community Church and Schools, Steve Falk, director of Community Mission of Hope, Eric Taylor, client management pastor of Community Mission of Hope, and Randy Taylor, president of Teen Community Pantry, all of whom are here tonight. A 2.5-hour interview covered approaches to service delivery, public education, marketing, branding of community efforts, need for dignified housing, short and long-term goals, organizational structure, and the growing issue of homelessness and panhandling in the city. Upon conclusion of that interview, the city team determined that Community Mission of Hope had the qualifications needed to achieve the city's goal of eliminating homelessness and providing assistance to those in need while moving individuals down a respectable path of independence and self-sufficiency. On November 26, 2013, January 28th of 2014, and again on February 11th of this year, the city staff team met with the Human Services Subcommittee, Mayor Edwards and Councilmember Nagar, to discuss Community Mission of Hope's list of comprehensive services, partnerships, and the philosophy of providing a hand up and not just a handout. As outlined in their scope of work, an outline of their scope of work was provided to the subcommittee, who agreed that the Community Mission of Hope had the proven resources and abilities to provide the pantry operations with professional care and compassion. This includes overseeing the collection and distribution of food, hygiene items, clothing, cold weather items, and such, providing training in client management, customer service etiquette, available resources, proper protocol for dealing with the homeless, and food handling procedures, and to facilitate the delivery of wraparound services by partners, including counseling, pregnancy support, military veterans assistance, addiction and dependence support groups, financial management, assistance, child care, education, interim housing, and emergency shelter. The subcommittee again continued to stress that pantry operations represent a micro view of the larger macro issue of homelessness in Temecula. And another important facet of Community Mission of Hope is their ability to leverage community partnerships and resources without negatively impacting the city budget to positively impact our local population and those in need. With that, the first part of the recommendation is to approve a 1-year license agreement with the Community Mission of Hope to provide pantry operations for people in need, with the option to renew for 2 additional 1-year terms at the discretion of the City Council. This will take us to a more macro view of the development of the Community Action Plan on Homelessness, based upon feedback from the Human Services Subcommittee, which we entitled Responsible Compassion. In a way, it's our mission of hope. With that, the Chief.
Thank you. In December, Mayor Edwards met with the city manager to establish the elimination of Temecula's growing homeless issue as a priority in 2014. She provided a 3-link plan that is being presented this evening. In subsequent meetings with staff, myself, Mayor Edwards, and Councilmember Nagar, functioning as the Ad Hoc Human Services Subcommittee, worked to bring this program forward in conjunction with the Community Pantry RFP as a comprehensive means to address homelessness via nonprofit services. The program's purpose is to develop a comprehensive strategy for eliminating homelessness in the city of Temecula. The program is described as the mission of the city of Temecula's Responsible Compassion Program is to further improve the quality of life by developing residents, businesses, and visitors' awareness, understanding, and participation in a comprehensive strategy to eliminate homelessness in Temecula. Our objectives are described in the following. Homelessness describes a condition of people without a regular dwelling, as the act of homelessness is a conditioned circumstance and not criminal activity. Staff was directed to provide a community action plan that included a 3-link approach entitled Responsible Compassion. to deal with the 4 types of homelessness in our community. The first type we identified is those who want and will accept a hand up to regain self-sufficiency. The second type identified are those who may be suffering from mental illness, post-traumatic stress disorder, or other conditions that inhibit reasoning skills. The third type identified is those who refuse help and choose to live outdoors while observing the law. And the fourth type are those who refuse help, make a conscious choice to be homeless, and may be engaging in illegal activity. The last category there, general associated with reports of theft, public intoxication, trespassing, aggressive panhandling, and vandalism. This effort has already been initiated through a revived problem-oriented policing team resources guide, which is disseminated by the POP team, park rangers, community senior centers, as well as the Community Mission of Hope.
Now, as a result of feedback from residents and business owners about the growing homeless problem in Temecula, Mayor Edwards has provided the following detailed 3-link approach in conjunction with her colleague, Councilmember Nagar, as a guideline for a program entitled Responsible Compassion. The program consists of the following elements: collaboration, coordination, and communication. Here's the plan. First, collaboration with a variety of partners and of nonprofit stakeholders, such as Community Mission of Hope, Project Touch, and Helping Our People, to provide effective and comprehensive services that will provide support and a path to self-sufficiency without expending taxpayer dollars. The long-term goal is to provide services to all who want to get back into the mainstream and live in a conventional lifestyle. Those who fail to progress will not be allowed to participate. Coordination of efforts between the Temecula Police, Riverside County Flood Control, and City Park Rangers to increase surveillance and inspections of areas typically occupied by homeless encampments, and to provide consistent cleanup of problem areas. This may also include review of legislation with the goal of maintaining a continual, visible, and physical presence in order to deter illegal activity. And communication with Temecula residents and businesses through an extensive awareness campaign. And the campaign will inform the community, which includes residents, businesses, and even the homeless population, about actions that perpetuate unwanted and/or illegal behavior or conditions that negatively impact the quality of life here in Temecula. So the work plan. You know, Temecula's faith-based community has traditionally taken the lead to organize community partners to provide food, clothing, and referrals, advocacy for dignified housing, and et cetera. And Community Mission of Hope's lead in this effort through the Pantry Agreement is key. As I mentioned, there was an extensive interview process to determine that any recommendation we provide here tonight is with a partner that cares much about this community as we do. And Community Mission of Hope truly is that partner. Implementation of the Responsible Compassion 3-link program will seek to expand past efforts via a strategic plan focused on accomplishing the aforementioned program objectives. This strategic plan will encompass the following: development of work teams where we identify individuals to serve on community action teams. These individuals may come from nonprofits, partner agencies, city departments, and the business and residential community. Objectives. Each of the identified teams will have specific and detailed objectives that will encompass one or more of the areas identified in the program description. And timelines will be established for each of those objectives to ensure that a sustainable, responsible compassion effort is established that is consistent with the City Council's priorities. This organizational framework allows for participation from other stakeholders with a vested interest in eliminating the impacts that homelessness has on the individuals and Temecula's quality of life. They too will be invited to participate in responsible compassion. Their association will help fulfill the goal of creating a multi-agency collaboration for shared resources and support. Envision would be interest from the district, Cal State, VFW, the Chamber, Pechanga, and more. Fiscal impact. The costs associated with this agreement are unchanged from the previous operator. The city's annual cost of $9,000 to maintain the exterior of the escalator house and barn, along with the landscaping, have been appropriated in the Public Works fiscal year 2013-14 operational budget, and the licensee shall just pay an annual rent amount of $1. So with that, staff also and proudly recommends that the City Council endorse the proposed community action plan, programs, and objectives. Upon council approval, the team, many are here tonight again, will move forward to work with Community Mission of Hope and other stakeholders to construct work teams and develop a 5-year strategic plan consistent with the city's core values of a healthy and livable community and accountable and responsive city government. That concludes our report.
Thank you, gentlemen. If you could just hold for 1 minute. Mayor Pro Tem Comachero.
Questions of staff, just two. You talked about the fiscal impact just a moment ago not being any different than that with the current operator. If I heard you right, I just would like verification. The funding at $9,000 a year would need to be allocated whether there was a program in there or not. It's building maintenance and landscaping. So we're not funding the program.
That is correct.
We're just funding the maintenance of our existing
That is
building.
correct.
Okay, I think that's important. And two, maybe questions of the mayor and Mr. Nagar. Was there any discussion in particular about any differences that there might be in terms specifically of veterans issues and veterans homelessness? I just think it's important, while all homeless people need to have some level of caring, I certainly agree with that. I think we need to pay utmost attention to those people who gave so much to us as Americans and make sure we take care of them. So did that enter into the conversation at all?
You mean-
A couple of thoughts.
Yeah, we did
Yes,
discuss
the
that.
answer is yes. And certainly, they would be treated to the degree that you can treat a veteran with homeless issues and the resources that they have available that may not be available to somebody who's not a veteran, but absolutely. And Mayor Edwards, if I may, can I augment that staff report just a little bit?
Sure.
First of all, it was a good staff report, and you presented it in the manner I expected it. But I also wanted to add a little bit to it, how we got here, and I think that it's important. So there may be a little bit more dialogue and commentary at this point, which I normally wouldn't give till later on. So I just wanted everybody to know that. First of all, in the beginning, I really was not in favor of this program. But it's hard to look at Scott Treadway and all the work that he's done in this community and not look at him in a responsible way and say he can handle this. And I have full faith in him, as I do the mayor. The three-prong approach that you guys so eloquently put, I'm going to put a little bit more bluntly, because this was important to me, and I think it's going to lend itself to the discussion. I laid down some criteria that my colleague, Ms. Edwards, agreed to and that we're going to talk about tonight that I think is very important. That the pantry is a pantry service to the degree that it gives out food. That's what the intention was for. Of course, it give out toiletries and clothing and things like that. That's certainly appropriate. But I think we made it clear that I did not want to see any type of showering, laundry facilities, or overnight sleeping. It was important that we have a discussion tonight on who gets these services, because we're emphasizing that this is for previous Temecula residents only. And so we need to define what that is and how that is proved. Another part of this approach, which I would want to see covered a little bit more in our discussion, is how we interact with the community as to how they interact with the homeless. You know, this is a very caring and compassionate community. And so what we have here is a lot of our churches going out to the parks and feeding the homeless, or supporting panhandling at the freeways and in other areas such as the gas stations and things like that, which are actually promoting the homelessness. And so it's a very difficult thing to go out and say, folks, we don't want you to do that, because a lot of our people think they're doing very good things. And in essence, they really are, but it's also exacerbating the problem. The other aspect of this other approach and I'm going to put a little bit more emphasis on it than the chief of police was, is that it's a full court press on any outdoor sleeping in the creek, sleeping under the overpasses, or sleeping outdoors on private property to the degree that private property owner allows us to enforce laws on his property. It's not going to be allowed. In other words, if you don't really want help, this is our attitude in Temecula for homelessness. If you want help, we'll help you. If you need medical assistance, we're going to help you get that medical assistance. But if you choose to disregard all of that, this is not the place to be, okay? And that we're, at least this council member, and hopefully this council, to the degree that we can do it under the law, is going to ensure that this is a very uncomfortable place to be homeless and sleep outdoors in Temecula. And if that means going into the creek beds daily, that's what we're going to do. If that means looking under the freeway overpasses to the degree that we have to, then that's what we're going to do. So we'll help. But if you don't want help, this is not the place to be. And that's my augmentation of your staff report.
And if I may, Councilmember, when you refer to homeless, you're referring to intentionally homeless.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Of course. Of course, because anybody who wants help, we want to help. Absolutely no doubt about that.
Thank you.
And I would add to that, the one reason we broke them down by category was because there are, believe it or not, people who want to be homeless. I mean, they have a choice, and when are offered with shelter and programs to better their conditions, they choose not to, for whatever reason. They want to avoid responsibility, they want to continue in that lifestyle, and certainly homelessness in and of itself is not against the law. People are allowed to live outdoors. What people are not allowed to do, you are not allowed to do it, I'm not allowed to do it, Mr. Roberts is not allowed to do it. You cannot trespass, you cannot litter, you cannot use drugs, you cannot be drunk in public, you cannot urinate in public, and any number of other things. And those are the things that we would watch for normally, and so those are the things we're going to continue to watch for and enforce rigorously. So no different than if it were any other person. But if you choose to live outdoors in Temecula, you're going to have to obey the laws just like everyone else. So it definitely takes this full approach to make it work. And Temecula is a very compassionate place to live. People are very generous. You can make up to $200 a day at the end of an off-ramp, which is, it's a lot of money. So it's going to be, we have to have all three of those links in play, and Mission of Hope provides a key piece to this, working with Team Pantry, and that is to have that safety net for those who want to get back into the mainstream and to regain that regular lifestyle of being self-sufficient. So if anyone has any other questions for staff?
I do have questions.
Mr. Nagar?
Yeah, having said all that, Mr. Hawkins, are we good? We feel that we're covered the no showering, laundry, sleeping issue in the agreement?
Yes, and if I can, anyone, Scott or Steve, if you'd like to come down and address that quickly. But yeah, I think we were pretty clear from the Human Services.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and I just have to really commend the staff and City Council for all the work that they've put in. It's been an incredible journey, just building relationships, and to walk that delicate balance. Mr. Nagar, as you mentioned, that you want to be compassionate, but you want to do it in the right way. And to me, there's three kinds of compassion: either no compassion, which is entirely unacceptable and uncivil. There's irresponsible compassion, which just gives away the farm and perpetuates the problem. That really does no good ultimately. Could actually make matters worse. And then the responsible compassion approach is to say we will provide the level of services appropriate for the walk that you're on towards dignity and towards self-sufficiency. The pantry site, we're very clear, is a Temecula site. It's Temecula owned, and so we will serve Temecula residents. We also have a northern site that may have a broader function, all within the law, within the codes, that might cover regional residents. We understand the southern site is a city site specifically for food, and from our perspective, just to be very clear, from our perspective, that's about relationship building. This isn't really about food as much as it is about relationship building, getting to know these men and women and walking with them towards dignity and towards self-sufficiency. But the idea that we will provide everything that they need to remain homeless is actually part of the problem, and we will not do that. That's our pledge to the council, to the staff, and to the residents of the city of Temecula. As we talked about in our meetings, the fallout of something like this is that, there may be an accusation that because we're pulling back services, that that's not compassionate. And so we're prepared to defend boldly the reality that services, may decrease, will decrease for people who are not willing to walk a journey towards self-sufficiency, who are able. There's going to come with consequences. That may not go over real well. But we cannot keep giving people the same things to remain perpetually homeless. And that's when we realize we're just one small piece of this puzzle here. All the faith-based communities and the churches and compassionate residents, it's going to have to be a community-wide process. Long answer to a short question.
If I may follow up with my questions.
Sure.
Pastor, as I said, I have tremendous trust in you and what you do in this community. What are we going to do? What type of outreach do you envision to those that want to be benevolent in the non-productive ways you described? What's going to be our approach?
Well, we're considering several things. I think, number one is just to continue to foster great relationships with other agencies, whether they're municipal agencies or other nonprofits, to keep encouraging and equipping each other, to further keep this unified approach going. And there are a lot of great agencies that we have a chance to partner with and be in a relationship with, and we're meeting constantly. And both myself and Steve, our Community Mission of Hope director, Mr. Steve Falk, he's been working tirelessly to keep fostering relationships with, for example, the regional pantries are in great relationship with each other. We're heading towards the direction of sharing databases so that we know that people aren't hopping from pantry to pantry and maybe receiving more food than they need, or even selling that or trading it for who knows what. That really, to me, that unified sense of partnership, trading databases, sharing stories is going to be absolutely vital.
So, to my staff, do you foresee a public outreach to churches and to our citizens and community that says when you give to panhandlers, you're actually promoting homelessness? Do we have a plan for that sort of outreach?
And yes, we do, and I think you've hit it on the head. I mean, that's the effort that we're looking at undertaking, led by Community Mission of Hope, other stakeholders, but sending a positive message. Again, responsible compassion, but emphasis on responsible, though.
Mm-hmm.
So,
in other words, getting out to our community that says, you know what, we know you want to give to the panhandler on the freeway because that's the type of citizens we are, but we had a better idea for you. We have another place where you can give and make sure that it goes right to that person to really help those people. Is that where we're going?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Folks want to give, and this is a compassionate community, but there has not been an organizational framework to basically have all of those resources and coordinate that approach, and that's what we're submitting here tonight.
Got it.
We've even talked about producing business-type cards that people can hand to panhandlers that has all the contact information.
Sure.
And we just add a couple of things. We have been talking internally among our staff and key volunteers that we might do a public outreach in terms of a community-wide mailer. Definitely there will be a social media campaign about continually educating our city on how to best help people, genuinely help people in a responsible way. I help to lead our local pastors network, and there are about 40 to 50 churches in that network, and we get together roughly quarterly for breakfast and to be able to keep this in front of them so the faith-based community can be on the same page. So it's a broad-based approach in lots of different avenues.
If I can, I think like staff, you hear the passion from Community Mission of Hope, and that's why it was so important. Step one is to get them into the pantry, because you know what they're going to do, but that was step one, and you see the progression that will take place.
A couple more questions, if I may, Madam Mayor. It's real important that we don't become a magnet for homelessness because we're offering services. And the way I understand we're doing that is to ensure that whatever we're doing, particularly at this pantry area, I understand you have something else going, Pastor Treadway, in the northern part in the county area. But for this particular area, we are only offering the services to Temecula residents. So or previous Temecula resident, however you want to define that. What mechanism are we going to use? What's the criteria are we going to use? Have we figured that out yet?
There is an intake process. Keep in mind, human services in this respect is a profession. It's a respected profession, and so there's not just a willy-nilly, handout sort of an environment. There's an intake process, and there are forms and verifications of IDs and utility bills and proof of income. There's a whole intake process that not only identifies the needs of that family in terms of the tangible, physical needs in front of them, but also the causal needs, which could go to addiction issues, it could go to mental health issues, it could go to family issues. So there is an intake process that does validate residency. I would say the fine-tuned specifics, previous resident, current resident, when you're talking about homelessness, it is a little, as you can imagine, it's a little gray. But we want to do everything we can to ensure that we are dealing on that site with Temecula residents. But be assured that wherever we operate, it is always in the context of relationship and a journey together. So the idea that people come and just kind of whatever, that's not the case anywhere we serve. We're in relationship, walking with them towards a common goal of self-sufficiency.
Well, let's kind of just take a scenario for a minute. Somebody comes in, they need services, and you ask the golden question, well, are you now or were you a Temecula resident? And they go, yeah, I was. And you say, well, where do you live? And they can't tell you, or they say, well, I lived over there in Starlight Ridge, or whatever. Well, I mean, is there a probe that says, well, do you have a utility bill? Do you have a driver's license? Or what if they tell you something like, well, I lived with my sister, or I was living with my friend for 3 months? I mean, what is our criteria to ensure that somebody doesn't come from Riverside and says, yeah, I was living with my friend for 2 months, and that makes me a Temecula resident now? How are we going to control that?
A couple of answers to that. First of all, the list you mentioned earlier, that's all of the above. Utility bills and driver's license. Again, when you're talking about chronic homeless, you can have a challenge there. But it's not an insurmountable challenge. At some point, can you absolutely, with certainty, define residency for homeless people every time, 100% of the time? The answer is no, and there's no way that I'd be able to stand before you with any integrity and say that. What I will tell you is every effort will be given on the intake effort and the intake process to ensure that we are responsibly adhering to the will of the council and the residents of the city of Temecula to care for and to walk with either current or former, as we fine-tooth this, Temecula residents. The other reality, and this is just as important, and this should really alleviate some concerns in terms of being a magnet. I've been to rescue missions that are, we'll call them old school. The idea of human warehousing or food lines where there's no real relationship there, it's just give outs. That's where the magnet takes place. When you're just giving things out willy-nilly without any relationship, without any journey, and a real walk towards self-sufficiency, that's where the magnet happens. So I would say there would be no concern in terms of us being a magnet, because we want to be in relationship and we're going to walk with people down a journey where they're going to have things to do. They're going to have programs to go to. They're going to have counseling to attend. They're going to have case management meetings. Believe me, people who are just looking to go here and there for handouts, they're not going to find that in the community mission of hope environment. That is old school. It is deemed statistically ineffective, and the whole world of humanitarian efforts like this is going towards responsibility and real work on behalf of the recipients.
To follow up on your question, Mike, let's turn it the other way. What if you have someone who's come from ABC community and they've come down here because and we know this is a fact, because they know Temecula residents are so generous and they know if they panhandle here, they can receive a lot of funding. So are you just going to allow them to be homeless because they've come from somewhere else? Our goal is to, it's inhumane to allow people to be homeless. I mean, it just is. So if we know that there are services available and the services are provided by a nonprofit organization and that really isn't coming out of taxpayer dollars and that costs the city nothing other than the use of the facility under the same agreement that we've always had, and if that person's going to remain on your streets, would you want them to remain on the street? I mean, see, it's a catch-22.
It's a catch-22, and I'd like to have that discussion when
Yeah.
we get to
Yeah,
discussion.
so think
'Cause
about
I will,
that.
and bring that up again, because I think we need to talk about it. I thoroughly get your point.
Yeah.
But I can see the other side too, so let's discuss
Yeah.
that. A quick follow-up question, and then I'll release the mic, and this is over to Chief Kubel. Chief, somebody is camping in the river, camping under the overpasses, camping on public property up in the hillsides. Not allowed, right?
It would be violation of trespassing if the property owner didn't want them there.
Okay, got it. And so to the degree that we have the private
Could you
property
get closer to the
owners-
microphone, please?
Yeah,
Thanks,
sorry.
Jeff.
To the degree we have the private property owner's permission, and certainly to the degree that it's public property in some capacity, we're booting them out, correct?
Yeah, we're enforcing the trespassing penal code section to have them leave the property, absolutely.
And in what manner, if possible, how do we ensure they don't go back the next day?
The POP team is just going to have to check, and the property owner, if they're on site, are going to have to be diligent and let us know.
Okay.
But the POP team is very aware of the locations that the transient and homeless individuals congregate and where they go. They spend a lot of their time talking with them, trying to give them the help that they need, to funnel them to the new pantry operation type of thing. But they're just going to have to stay on top of it. So it's going to be a combined effort between the PD and the community.
So now we've had these discussions, and so I'm asking you questions in a sense that I kind of know the answer to, but it's important that we sort of daylight them, the public can see, and the rest of the council, because we've talked in subcommittee meetings. So your officers understand, and if this council implements this plan, that you know that you're about to have to implement what I like to call a full court press, but definitely an effort and a focus on illegal trespassing as it relates to the intentional homeless. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's already begun somewhat, because the process of identifying property owners and communicating the problem to them and getting, if they're not on-site property owners, a trespass letter so to allow us to enforce trespassing takes several months, sometimes longer if we can't get in contact with the property owner. So that process has started. As those trespass letters and those property owners are educated and the trespass letters come in, we're able to more effectively enforce the trespassing sections.
So standing at the freeway off-ramp, panhandling is not illegal, correct?
It's illegal in the vehicle code. It's an infraction if they're impeding traffic. So they would have to step out into the lane, the car would have to stop, and there would have to be an impeding of the flow of traffic. It doesn't happen all the time they're standing there, but there are times when it does become a violation.
And are our officers going to be looking toward that?
We are. It's something that we have to see to take action on. I've already started letting the officers know that I want them to be aware and on the lookout for that, and I'm also going to communicate that to the Highway Patrol, who has jurisdiction of the freeway, so that they can assist us as well. It's a difficult one to police, so to speak, because it has to be just the right thing for a violation to occur, but we're definitely going to be on the lookout for it, and if we see a violation, we're going to take action.
And stopping somebody doing that, and you give them an infraction, it's like a ticket.
Correct.
In which case, is it a promise to appear, or is that type of thing?
Correct.
Okay, and so maybe they appear, maybe they don't, but they go on doing it. You guys, the officers, I should say, conduct field interviews, et cetera, if there are warrants out for their arrest or other priors, things like that. You would handle it differently?
Absolutely.
So in essence, I'm going to say this one more time just to be certain. We're ready, in conjunction with this, to do a full court press on this issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Mr. Roberts is ahead of you, Mr. Comachero. Okay.
Talking about it from the CHP side, the actual violation, I think, was 21-461, failure to obey an official sign. And Caltrans actually puts at most of the off-ramps, especially in Temecula, the sign right there at the entrance, so you can't miss it, and you know it's there. And that is an infraction. That's not a misdemeanor, but that's probably from the CHP side would work that way. Just a comment, because I don't want to really get into this until later. I see the role that we're taking. It's pretty much the start to getting these people where they need to get to. I represent Habitat for Humanity. I'm the oldest, the longest member. Longest and oldest, well, maybe not the oldest, but about 20 years. And
You may be the oldest.
yeah, anyway, I look at that as being the next step where you can transition people through help. And that's what we do, and we're doing a much better job because we have a lot of people that are backing us because they see this problem. You know, when a person can get put in an apartment with their whole family for a period of time while they're waiting to find out if they can get a house or be resettled, and that's something we'll talk about later on, but I'd like to be involved in that portion of it because that's what I've been doing for 20 years.
To add you to the partner list.
Yeah, I know that Habitat would love to be a partner in this. So let's think about that later, but not now, right now. And I got to tell you, I love what you said tonight. I mean, we finally got it together. We really did. It's been a while. We've tried. I mean, I've been on the council over 20 years, and we kind of jump-started it a couple of times, but it never went anywhere. But I think with Mike being as strong as he is, I think we're going to do it this time. Thank you.
Mr. Comachero?
Thanks, and the mayor as well. But I think you answered my question, Chief, but I just want to make sure I'm clear and the public is clear. When it comes to trespassing and the enforcement side, I know in our code enforcement, we're complaint-driven. We generally don't go out and investigate something until and unless we get a complaint. It sounds like trying to get letters from the property owners and be proactive, that whether we have a letter or not, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we would go out and try to find that property owner where the trespassing is occurring, get them to agree to allow us to police that. Is that correct? So you guys are going to be out there being proactive?
Yeah, that's correct. Trespassing requires the property owner to assert their property right for the police department to take action. They can either do that physically present on the property calling us, or if they're an off-site property owner, if we know there's a trespassing problem, we proactively contact them, explain the problem, explain the trespass letter that the penal code allows for, and we ask them to provide that to us so that we can enforce on their behalf.
Can we, and again, I think you said that we were in the process of doing this, but get those letters from the property owners beforehand in areas that we know may be targets, have them on file, and if we do that, are they good indefinitely? Do they have a sunset date, or?
They're good for 6 months, and then what we do is the property owner knows that ahead of time, and then when the letter is getting ready to expire, we get another letter, and it's a rotating process.
We go at the end of the 6 months, we go and say, we need a new letter, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
And we have them all on Front Street already. Okay, no further questions, and I see we have some public comments. So would you like to call the first speaker?
Carol Monroe, to be followed by Wayne Hall.
Ms. Monroe, good evening.
Hello. I thought we'd be speaking before everyone else would. I like hearing what these fellows had to say in your comments, and I hope there's some teeth in some of these programs. But I'm going to dredge up some past. By the way, Madam Mayor, when I saw you last week, you told me that this agenda would be on the 22nd. Now, you weren't trying to head me off, were you?
No, I made sure that staff contacted you to make sure that you knew it was this week. Because Mr. City Manager, remember, what did I say?
And I believe Mr. Hawkins left you a voicemail.
I said,
Ms.
oh, you better
Monroe.
make sure she's on there because I just told her tonight. I thought it wasn't coming until the 22nd, so I'm glad you're here.
Okay. Are you?
Yeah, I am, sure.
Okay, I'm speaking this evening about vagrants, felons, drug users, and drug pushers in Temecula. Lest I be thought as lacking in compassion for the unintentional homeless, people such as a family with children that have come upon hard times, I would like to make it clear that I am not addressing that segment of the homeless population. As a matter of fact, it seems that these families have received help. According to the homeless across the nation in Temecula, these statistics I picked up from City Hall, there's about 51 chronic homeless people in Temecula, 4 veterans, and I understand 2 accepted help and 2 declined help, 1 youth, which is 1 too many, and I think it's about 25 sheltered and no families. So, okay, I've been told and have heard many times, including tonight, it is not against the law to be homeless. Is it against the law to be a squatter and have an open fire on public property? Is it against the law to use illegal drugs on public property or in public? Is it against the law to litter and deface public property with food wrappers, beer bottles, broken glass needles, and other drug paraphernalia? Is it against the law to panhandle? Is it against the law to be falling down drunk in public or be passed out on public streets or at the duck pond? And by the way, I have pictures. Is it against the law to be a drug pusher? Is it against the law to break and enter into private businesses and private homes? Is it against the law to urinate and defecate on public streets? And is it against the law to tie a man up in a guitar shop and beat him to death? These things have been going on for years, not days or weeks or months, and now the city's going to tell us what they're going to do. Temecula rolled out the red carpet for them. Temecula fired up the welcome wagon for them. I half expected a ticker tape parade down Old Town. The city gave vagrant advocates grant money, and look what we bought for that money and for your decisions. Last Wednesday, Mayor Edwards told me over the past few months the city has done over 30 sweeps and 1 helicopter sweep of the creek beds and places that the vagrants live and congregate. I'd like to know the results of those sweeps. The third prong of your approach is community awareness to educate the public regarding this subculture. I've spoken on this issue, and others tonight have spoken on the issue. Old-time businesses have spoken to you about the issues, and I've read emails from citizens over the past year about the issue. We don't need an awareness campaign. We are aware. This last prong puts the onus and responsibility on the community. The responsibility should have always been on the city, and you really did nothing about it until now we're hearing what you're going to do. The city talks about what it will do. Will it be tomorrow, next month, next year? You speak as if this is a new problem. You should be speaking about what you have been doing. By the way, Webster's dictionary defines a transient as a person who is passing through with only a brief stay. The Temecula transients are not passing through. They've set up shop here, and they have no intention of going anyplace. And I hope you take care of it.
Next speaker.
Wayne Hall.
Mr. Hall, good evening.
It was a pretty good, the way it was spelled out how, what they're going to do for the homeless. My question is, the pantry doesn't do just one thing. Doesn't the pantry also collect food for people of low income? Those people who live in these apartments that they run out of money. They run out of food. They come down to the pantry to get food. None of that was mentioned tonight. Not one iota. Have we forgotten them?
No,
Well, I'm in awe because I didn't hear anything about this. Are we going to further discussion this later? Well, I'd like to be a part of the discussion, but the main thing is I've given oranges. I've emptied out my deep freeze to put hams and turkeys in from Pachanga when they got, well, we're going to deliver 200, and they delivered 500. Now, I don't know about most homeless, but I've never seen a homeless put a turkey on a barbecue grill. I mean, you can, but so the question is that going to be stopped now? Are we going to tell our friends to the south, we no longer need your hams. We no longer need your turkeys. We take care of our own homeless, but we're not going to take care of our low income because that pantry has done a lot with the low income, but not a word has been said about that tonight. I am not for doing away with that portion. Now, homeless, yeah, we have a problem with homeless. I won't deny that. But the low income, the people, the farmers, I've seen farmers come down and put lettuce, corn ears, and all sorts of stuff out there. Are they no longer allowed to come in and drop off their stuff that they grown? I haven't heard a word about that, and I'm disappointed. Actually, I'm actually hurt about it because Temecula has always, even the old fruit stand on 79 South, anybody came by there and they couldn't afford the corn, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. We don't take care of our low income. Not a word was said about that tonight, and I'm a little upset about that. I hope something is said about them.
I have an answer for you, Mr. Hall.
Okay. But
Pastor Treadway, could you please come forward?
the thing that I thought was funny also was they want to show them the path, or they want a relationship. Well, that's fine. But some of these people aren't from Rancho community, or they may be Catholics, they may be Hebrews, they may be Muslims, I don't know. But wouldn't it be a little different for people who would say, well, I'm going to go over to Rancho community. They got the best food storage there, but they don't want to hear other things about their religion.
Well, I think when he's talking about the path, he's talking about drug counseling, he's talking about job training, job placement, and other practical
Which
everyday things.
in
too.
most cases doesn't apply to people who are low income because they usually have one or two jobs.
He's going to address that right now.
I hope he does. Thank you.
I will applaud that as well. You know, that's frankly our sweet spot is giving food to families who are struggling. We launched the Rescue Mission in 2009. Since then, we have provided over 2 million meals to families with low income who are struggling. We have serviced hundreds of families who are in that exact same situation. The Rescue Mission has a farm in Rainbow Valley. That,
How many acres?
I don't know, about 5 acres, but it produces over 100,000 pounds of fresh produce for needy families in not only our immediate area, but actually that food goes to our region. So, you know, the specific concern of the City Council has been the homeless and the community, but absolutely we will continue to provide what we call the gap help. Sometimes the food runs out around the 20th and families are staring at a power bill or their cupboards and they have to make a choice. And we provide that gap so that they can keep the power on. And honestly, that is among the greatest things we can provide is homelessness prevention. Because if your power goes off and you can't pay that rent and you end up being homeless, well, now we're increasing the homeless population. And so, we are just one group that provides a lot of help in the gap in order to make sure that families are well fed and nobody goes hungry. So I applaud your concern, and perhaps that should have come up more prominently in my time.
That's a separate program.
It's
And
a separate program.
And that's
Yeah.
why it wasn't addressed tonight. That's why we're dealing with Mission
Correct.
of Hope, dealing with the homeless.
Correct.
But the Rescue Mission is a totally separate program and has everything covered that Mr. Hall had concerns
Yeah,
about.
we are actually very well covered there.
Yes.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so I have no other public comments, so this is where we will entertain council comments. Mayor Pro Tem Comachero.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First off, I have to say a job well done by our committee members, Mayor Edwards and Councilmember Nagar. I think this program has really come to the forefront in the last, I don't know exactly what the time frame is, at least a year, maybe even 2 years, where we've started to see an uptick in the homeless population. And I think in part it has been because of the work of some very good-minded and good-hearted people who started instituting some programs to help the homeless, and unfortunately, I think the end result of that was we attracted more, and that's exactly what this program is designed to prevent. So it's being maybe a little bit reactive, but it is certainly timely today. I'd like to make a comment, too. The speaker said there's no need for a community outreach program that the public knows about homelessness. I would agree with that as far as you went with it, Ms. Monroe, but I think the outreach program, as I see it, and if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me, is not to advise people of what we're doing and not to advise people that there is a homeless problem that has been burgeoning in Temecula. The awareness program is to let people know that as good-hearted as they may be, and I'll tell you, I and my friends, we all fall into this category, I'm sure most of you do, where at times you feel a need to be compassionate and you'll give somebody $1 or $2 or $5 or $10. And what we need to tell people is you're not helping them and you're not helping the city. That's the outreach that we need to do. And I know I've spoken to many of my friends over the last couple of weeks when we knew this was coming forward on the agenda. And I got kind of a look of shock where they had no idea that their good-heartedness and their generosity was not a benefit either to the recipients of that generosity or to the city as a whole. So I definitely think we need a strong outreach program, and some people may not want to hear that all the time. We're a great and generous community, and we pride ourselves on being kind to people in need, people less fortunate than we are. And for us as a city, for our police department, for our faith-based community to say to them, you know what, don't give. That's a hard message, and a lot of people won't agree with that. But it's important that we get that message out because that's a key component of this program. I see kind of three prongs a little bit differently than what we've brought forward, just different subject matter. One is that education. Two is that we want to be as compassionate, responsibly compassionate as we can be. And three, that responsible compassion simply does not work without enforcement. And so we have to have all three of those elements in order for this to work. We have two objectives here: to end homelessness for the benefit of those that are homeless, and to end homelessness for the benefit of our citizens who live here who are not homeless. That's the charge. I can't think of a program that would go any further to getting this done than what our team has put together. Now the proof's going to be in the pudding, and we've got to go out and do it. So I strongly support it. It doesn't come without the knowledge that it's not going to just happen. We have to make it happen.
Mr. Agar.
Yep, thank you. I'd like to get some council input on, and I agree everything you said, and I think you articulated it well. I'd like to get some council input on who is Temecula homeless. We probably need to set some sort of criteria, or some sort of baseline for it. I don't have anything in particular in mind. I could throw out a few ideas, but I always intended to want to hear what my colleagues say on that issue.
Jeff?
I think it's a tough one, and I support the spirit of what you're saying. I think to the extent, and Pastor Scott, I think you said it beautifully, that every effort will be made to ensure that the folks that we're serving here are at least former Temecula residents, hopefully in their most immediate past residents. But how can you possibly know for sure? And as I was listening to the pastor speak, I thought, well, we can do everything we can. We can seek the utility bills. We can get whatever information we can through the intake process. At the end of the day, is somebody going to try to beat us? Yeah, somebody is, and somebody will. And then I thought, well, what's the worst thing that happens in that scenario? Obviously, we help people who wanted help badly enough that they lied through the intake system. Okay, people will do that, you know. And two, in order for them to be a part of the program, they have to make that walk towards self-sufficiency. So the worst that happens is one slips through the crack out of every 100 or 50 or whatever, and the end result is they wind up in a program that ends their homelessness. And if that's the worst things that happen, I could live with that. I think you probably could too. So, but the key is going to be to make those efforts through those. I don't think you can do any more than that. And keep human dignity. Because one of the things that troubles me here, even with the system as you laid out, Pastor, you got somebody who comes to the pantry, and we've seen this happen before. It's probably the lowest point in their life. They're coming with their hat in their hand, and they're asking for help, and pretty much I think we can guarantee that if they had any other option, they wouldn't be there. And to take them through a civil, compassionate intake process is fine. But if we start to make it an interrogation, and we take the last bit of dignity that some of these people have, it starts to get uncomfortable. So I just think we do everything we logically can, and we acknowledge, maybe not out there in the community, but here if one slips through the cracks once in a while and we can help them, there are worse things in life than that.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yes.
Obviously, I can't disagree with the thing that you said. But in order, you would keep sort of focus on something that I thought was accurate, that in order for the program to be effective, there has to be some sort of enforcement. Somewhere along the line, there's the possibility that some people are going to be told, no, you don't qualify, you're not a Temecula resident. I think we first have to say, while we're having this discussion, we all want to help the homeless. No, Miss Monroe, nobody's going to think you're a cruel woman because we want to deal with this problem. We all just have to deal with this problem, and I think having the dialogue is important without pointing fingers or saying you don't have compassion or whatever. I think everybody has compassion. Everybody wants to deal with this. Having said that, is what guarantees do we have that we're not becoming, or that we don't create a magnet to attract people from other parts, from other cities, who come here and say, yes, I live in Temecula, when there is no, now to the extent that they can be proved, but knowing that left with no proof, we're going to let them in the program anyway. That is not fail-safe. I don't mind somebody slipping through the cracks, but that's a big open door. At least it seems like it's a big open door.
How do you know when a murderer is executed if he's really guilty?
I don't know.
There are times when you're just not going to know, and you have to take it on faith.
Except this is what we do know. This is what we do know. And again, you articulated it very well. We engaged ourselves in an act of compassion some years ago by wanting to aid the homeless. And it morphed into a situation where those who we aided wouldn't shut down when they were supposed to shut down, and that when there were beds available here because there weren't enough Temecula homeless to fill them, we were put in a registry that allowed somebody who was homeless in Riverside to come on down. We got a bed for you in Temecula. We have to put some safeguards in place that this doesn't occur here with this program, or we're going to have people who want to come here and participate in it. And all the goodness that it is to get a hand up and get out. Put another way, you may have a family who's homeless in the city of Riverside that has every intention of wanting help, okay? And they may be good people, falling on hard times, but I guess what we're saying is don't come to Temecula for that help. Go somewhere in Riverside because we can't offer it to you. Now that sounds harsh,
but
and I don't mean to sound harsh, but here's what I'm saying, is we in Temecula don't have the capacity to handle and be compassionate throughout the whole region. We just don't have that capacity.
But remember, Mike, it's not we. It is Mission of Hope, and they have a big footprint.
I understand,
it's
but
other
we're
churches.
representing the people, though, is what I'm saying.
But the other thing is that these programs are not unique to Temecula. I mean, this three-link approach is going to be unique to Temecula. What we had before was a revolving door. We were our own worst enemy. We were funding someone who was just handing out food and blankets that allowed people to immediately go sell half the food, buy drugs, sell those drugs to our kids, and go back and live in the way they were. So this is what we have to repair. But there are programs like this in other places. So people who want to avail themselves of those programs, they can. And in fact, I would also submit to you that the programs in other places are even easier to access and will be easier for people to avail themselves of, because this program is not going to be that easy. They're going to be held accountable. And
let's frame it again. Let's be, at least just for the sake of conversation, let's frame it again. You're homeless in Temecula. We're presuming you had a home in Temecula, or were living in Temecula, and through events that you're not intentionally homeless, so if something happened and now you're homeless, and you want to avail of those services here in the city of Temecula. That's what we're offering. How do we ensure that's what we're offering, and only that? Not to somebody who passed through here a month ago, and yeah, I lived in Temecula with my buddy for a month. Is he a Temecula resident at that point? Or will he be told, no, you don't get services here? These are fundamental questions I just want to answer. And listen, I don't know that I have the answer, but we need to talk about this because it's going to come up.
Yes, let's talk about, I guess I'll go back to the alternative. If you say you can only deal with Temecula residents, then what you're doing is basically just leaving someone on the street.
And then I go back to then let's make the statement that it's not only for Temecula residents. Let's not couch it in that way. We're saying that we're running a program for homeless. Anyway, I'd love to hear what my colleagues have to say.
City manager had his hand up too. He may have a,
No, I was just going to make a
practical solution.
comment. And Kevin and Scott, maybe you can attest to my recollection, but as far as pantry food operations, which is the primary function geared to come out of this facility, that probably represents on the order of 70 to 75% to the low-income folks on food distribution. I'd say the homeless, as we're discussing the definition of homeless, represents a very small percentage of the customer per se to this facility. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I would say, from what I know of the previous operators of the pantry, who over this conversation we've become friends with, and there's a real camaraderie there. They have a wonderful organization that serves both the low income, as has been mentioned, and the homeless population, particularly those in the South. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with you that those numbers are correct. When it comes to the Community Mission of Hope, probably 95% of our recipients are low-income families. So that is definitely the case. And so we're talking about the residents here. There is a small segment of population, which I know is the heightened concern here, the small segment of population of those who are transient, and all too often they're transient, but we've got a very comfortable place for them. Geographically, it's very comfortable with the riverbed and the canyon. It is a compassionate community, so there's a lot of resources going their way. That's the concern. It is a small number, but we're talking about a small number of folks that are creating a big, big problem. And so, while we're talking about maybe 5% of the recipients, that's probably 90% of the concern here. So we absolutely want to make sure that we do everything we possibly can. I will tell you that in all of the places we've studied, there is no fail-safe proof of residency. All we can say is we will do our level best. Now, if you'd like, in cooperation with the staff, we can provide the intake process so that you can evaluate whether or not you think it is sufficient or needs to be more ironclad. And because from our perspective, we are providing a service for the city and for the representatives of the city, we're here to serve you and we're here to serve our city well. So we want to make sure we meet your expectations.
And if there's somebody living in the creek or along the road or in a bush by the freeway and they're not from Temecula, I want to get them out of the creek, out of the bush, out of the wherever, and get them enrolled in that program if they're willing to. And if they're not, then we're going to make sure that we are enforcing the law.
Right. And I'll give you an example. Chief Kubel mentioned to me something that's just intuitive. There are people who are chronic homeless in Temecula who have been here for 4 or 5, 6 years. They're not going to be able to produce proof of residency, but we all know them on a first-name basis. So there's a reasonability, lens here as well. That's a Temecula, quote, resident who needs to enter a program, and there will be gravity. This is a word that we use internally a lot. There will be gravity. We will help you with gravity. There needs to be a push or a pull to make the next step, the next step, the next step. And that, may be historically what has lacked in the less effective programs is there hasn't been gravity to walk the road towards self-sufficiency. I also want to make one thing crystal clear that I failed to mention earlier, that this is non-sectarian. We help human beings, regardless of their faith background, or we wouldn't be here having this discussion. The city would simply not allow it. Our faith only fuels compassion for all of humanity. And of course, the most compassionate thing we can do is journey with somebody towards dignity, self-respect, and self-sufficiency. So I hope that was helpful.
Pastor, don't walk away, because when it's my turn again, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
My turn now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing that I haven't brought up yet, but I think I should, because as you know, I work for Supervisor Stone also, and one of the things that I've been working on is when the release of prisoners are let go out in French Valley, they only have 2 ways to go, and that's either to Hemet or Temecula, and a lot of them come to Temecula. They are probably not going to be able to show their identification. Probably not. But they're going to need as much or even more help than our residences to just at least get helped to where they can get to where they need to go. And when they're let go, they're just let go anytime during the day or the night. They walk towards Winchester, and then they go either one way or the other.
Wow.
And by the next day, they're cold, they're wet, and they will do things that they don't want to do just to survive. And I don't want to, I'm afraid that we're just focusing in on Temecula residents, and there's others out there that we've got to help, not just Temecula residents. And I think all this, we're not ready. We're not there. I think you and I kind of are thinking the same thing. But all five of us have to get together and make sure that we do it right. Because if we don't do it right, it's going to get just as bad as it is now.
May I comment on that?
Yep.
You know, this is a lot of great discussion that is, you know, that you've been dealing with responsibly for many, many years, as well as your staff, and it is a complex issue that nobody has cracked the code. If somebody cracked the code, we'd be doing that exact same thing.
Right.
There's a nationwide, even global discussion around this issue, really towards solutions, not maintenance, but solutions, and we're just part of that discussion. So this is an ongoing conversation. There will not be a gathering of the five or a gathering of the staff or a gathering of all the partners and come up with the solution to end all. It's going to be a never-ending discussion that's going to keep assimilating best practices. And you know, you're right, Mr. Roberts, that sometimes if we have very, very hard lines where your letter of the law all the time, and you don't add to that a reasonability lens, you can actually keep the letter of the law and do damage to the city of Temecula. You know, for example, you refuse to help somebody while they have to, you know, break into a home to eat. So, something like, there's just a reasonability lens. So I'll give you an example here, just to maybe inform a further discussion that again will never end. If we refuse help in the moment every time somebody doesn't follow the strict bullet points, we could potentially create very, very serious problems, including petty theft and crimes and shoplifting that may go up. So perhaps on a policy level, and this is just something we do as well, perhaps there is a move, again, for solutions where we're going to feed you right now on the spot, but this is going to be it. It's going to be a one-time deal here. And we're going to ask you a lot of questions during the intake. You may have family in Virginia, and that's a solution waiting for you, but there's no way they're going to get a Greyhound ticket to Virginia. Well, spending a couple $100 on a Greyhound ticket to get that person coming out of French Valley to Virginia, you give them a food box, you buy them a bus ticket, you've solved a problem for the city of Temecula, you've effectively transitioned somebody now into a caring, you know, family or community. But in that scenario, if you just went by the letter of the law, you'd say no, and perhaps they're breaking into a store that night. Just one of a million possible scenarios, but just to show you the complexity of this, there has to be reasonability. So in other words, this is values-based, as opposed to being able to, you know, tightly document a scenario that's going to cover every possible eventuality. It's really values-based, and that's been, to me, the funnest part of interacting with the city and other partners that we're privileged to serve with, is our values are really congealing well. Everything you have all said, everything that the city staff has said, we're all nodding our heads going, you know, this is the value system that's going to get us towards the solution side.
Jeff?
Kind of a statement and a question. Mike, Ron, I'm not sure you and I are quite aligned because I do think if we're providing a service, and I think this for virtually every service that we provide, we need to be Temecula-based, and we need to make sure we take care of our own residents. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who pay the bills around here. They're the ones who build buildings like this and all the other facilities in town, and I think they're the ones that we have to concentrate our resources on. Having said that, I think at some point when the issue of determining residency, I think at some point we have to go as far as we logically can go, and I think, Pastor, that's what you alluded to. And at a point beyond that, for us as a city and us as a council, we've got to trust. And I think we've got to trust you, Pastor, and your organization, the people who we're working with you, to make sure that you understand, and clearly you do, what our objective is. And again, nothing is foolproof, and nobody can swear there won't be a time when somebody just flat out lies. You can do all the intake things you want. If somebody just is lying to you and you accept as proof what they say, that's an issue. I think the other alternative is if they can't produce proof, one of those items of proof, they just don't get services. And I tend to agree with you, Pastor and team, that there are times, not necessarily all the time, but there are times when that could be counterproductive to the program and the city, and somebody's got to make that call on the spot, where to the best of my opinion, your opinion, I think this one's okay. And I think we've got to trust that. So that's the direction I'd like to see. But I have a question for you, Pastor Scott. You talked about gravity and pushing and pulling somebody along the way. What do you do with a person or a family who willingly comes into the program? We prove they're a Temecula resident, former Temecula resident. They're precisely the kind of person who belongs in the program. And they go down step 1 and step 2 and then fall off the wagon.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
What's the alternative? Is the alternative a bus ticket to somewhere, anywhere out of town?
Well, again, it's complex. There's not a zero tolerance there, but there something akin to a 3 strikes sort of a scenario here. So just kind of walk with me. People are homeless for a reason. People are poor for a reason. One of the things that is a general principle of a lot of families in that scenario, or individuals, is that they simply haven't had either the upbringing, the parenting, the mentoring, the teachers to come alongside and teach them those skills that will actually make them self-sufficient. So it is unreasonable for us to assume that every family we serve is going to hit all their marks. They're going to fall down. And even in the people that we're privileged to case manage right now, there are constant failures. We thank God for His grace, and we thank God for the people who have poured grace into our lives. There are second chances, there are third chances. But through that case management relationship, you know when somebody's checking out. And when they check out, there's a sunset on the services. That's the tough love approach that less effective programs may not implement. It's not zero tolerance. It's a relationship. And relationships, again, are hard to quantify with bullet points. But at some point, you know somebody's checked out. They failed again and again and again. They dropped out of recovery. They're no longer going to counseling. They have decided not to work the program. At that point, and a lot of our mentoring comes from Orange County Rescue Mission, who are experts at this, and they continue to be mentors of ours. And so, we started in 2009, but we feel like we have 45 years of experience behind us. I mean, literally, on a call, cell phone, they respond right away. And many of us have had the privilege of getting to know some of those folks and touring their facilities. World class, actually national models. And so they're helping us, walk some of those policy lines and some of those procedural lines. When somebody falls off, for example, they might say, hey, services drop off for 3 months. Come and see us again in 3 months. So you're giving them yet a 4th chance. But there's some consequences now that are pretty stiff. And when they come back, they're going to have to re-enter the program and ensure that they're walking that line. If it was zero tolerance, nobody would go to.
I understand that, and I'm okay with that. But what happens at the point at which you identify that they're not coming back? And they go and they're back living in the creek?
Yeah,
are they then considered chronic and intentional homeless, and do you deal with it as an enforcement matter?
Yeah.
There's no other choice, I guess. So.
And what happens, and this is the tough part, and we fully expect to get some pushback on this. It's already happened out there in the blogosphere. If somebody intentionally checks out, they intentionally decide to be homeless, the services that we provide will come to a bare minimum where it will not be comfortable. We will not give you everything you need to stay chronically homeless. We will not do that. That'll be actually unkind. That's the height of a lack of compassion, is to give you everything you need to live in an undignified and as it's been said, inhumane way. So our services, will go to a bare minimum, and that might include just basic food to keep you alive, right? And that's the gravity, and that's going to be the tough part, and that's going to require a lot of community-wide education as well, because I guarantee if our services stop, there might be 14 other people, churches, agencies right behind to give everybody every tent, every sleeping bag, everything they need to continue a homeless city down there. Our commitment is not to fuel the problem. To me, it's classic codependency and enabling, you know, and people actually find their own personal satisfaction in continuing the homelessness of others. I mean, that's tragic. You're just continuing the problem. Our commitment, as much control as we will have over this, is to avoid doing that.
Just point blank, I know you, you're a great man of faith, you've got a great heart, and you're great for this community. When somebody comes to you looking for help and they can't prove what we need for them to prove, can you say no?
Well, oh yeah, we can say no. We don't have a problem saying no. It is a compassionate no. It's a door open no. It's a we will continue to love you. We'll continue to meet with you. These are the services that stop. It's like parenting. You know, it's like effective parenting. Everybody that has a child, you don't want to spoil them rotten. That's not going to do them any good. Any effective parent can say no, but still show absolute love. So it's not either laying down a hammer of just unkindness or giving them everything they want. It is a nuanced, relational environment that it takes a real level of compassion. I would also say expertise as well, which is why we're so grateful for Orange County Rescue Mission in order to do that effectively. You can say no without laying down a hammer or to communicate you're unloved. You can say no and love them, just like we all do with our children. I don't say that demeaningly. I just say that to lay a context for the complexity of the situation.
That's good.
Mike?
Thanks. And stimulating discussion, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm being swayed, and a lot of things are going through my mind. But I'll kind of leave where I'm at with with this last statement. You know, we're big on human services here in Temecula, and I think we got to continue to do that. We're at a place where we can do it. I think we're touching a lot of lives in so many ways, and I think this is one element in human services that we have to deal with. At the same time, we're having this discussion, and I liked what you said, is that, you know what, nobody has that magic element, that magic key, that solution, or we'd be implementing it. And so the only thing that we can do is really, like we're doing tonight, is have this open discussion without pointing fingers, without somebody saying you're not compassionate, or, we can't do that. If we really want to solve this, I think a couple of things have encouraged me. Number one is your program eventually ends. It's meant to get on and get off. Okay, so that's good.
And that's written in the document as well.
Right. We also know that, and I think everybody agrees here in this room, we cannot be a magnet for homelessness. So we're going to have to look at this program and gauge it and monitor it. And if it turns out that, you know what, we missed the mark. I mean, good intentions, missing the mark. We're going to have to revisit this and say, you know what, we're becoming a magnet for homelessness. It's not working. Which case, Mr. Comachero, we may have to say no. Okay?
I agree. Agree completely.
And that may happen. Although my faith tells me it won't. I have a feeling, actually, what you're proposing is going to work. And for this reason, I can give many examples, but one that stands out mostly in my mind. I remember when the mall was being approved, a long time ago, and those of you that were here, and I remember there were a lot of naysayers. How are we going to handle traffic? How are we going to do this? And you know what? There was a lot of questions. We didn't know, okay? Some things said we're going to do this, some said we're going to do that, we're going to build this road, whatever, but that may not be enough, all the unknowns. But we also knew we had the wherewithal to handle the problems when they came, that we would deal with it. And I see that here. I don't know that we're going to have all the answers tonight. By golly, we solved this issue. But if we don't engage in something and then mark it along the way and see what we're doing right, see what we're doing wrong, we're not going to get anywhere. So we need to engage and start this. I think it would be prudent if you can come back to us in 6 months and let us know how the program's working. And I hope my colleagues will agree to that. Other than that, I'll go ahead and move the item.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second, and I'm going to make closing comments here. Sitting in my palatial trailer behind the Boys and Girls Club, my office faces the creek. And over the course of the past year, I've seen more activity going in and out of that creek than any time that I can remember in the 27 years I've lived in Temecula. And so I became concerned, more concerned, and I saw what was happening And every time there was a food distribution at the pantry, I saw men, and sometimes women, walking along the creek, and they would have blankets and food in their arms, and they would congregate outside my window, and they would swap food amongst them, the food that they wanted, and the food that they didn't want ended up on the ground, and mostly white bread. For some reason, they had an aversion to white bread, and it would end up in a large pile on the ground. And then they would go and sit with their backs up against the pumping station, the Water District pumping station, and they would spend the rest of the afternoon watching the crows devour the food that they had dumped on the ground. And so I think the pattern is, and we know this for a fact because in my initial meetings with Chief Kubel and city staff, we know that they sell the food, a portion of the food, for money. They use that money to buy drugs. They sell those drugs to our kids and other people in Temecula to get more money, for which they use to buy more food and drugs, and it's just a perpetual cycle that continues. So there's a reason that the intentional homeless remain homeless, and they do it intentionally, and it's accountability, or it's because they're breaking the law and they don't want to be held responsible for anything. Those are the people that we just can't have influencing our children. But the only way we can deal with it is through stricter enforcement. And as you have heard through discussion tonight, enforcement happens just as it would happen with any other resident or person. Being homeless is not the issue. And I think I had already answered Mrs. Monroe's questions. I answered it before she even came up. Urination is not acceptable. It's against the law. Littering is against the law. Trespassing is against the law. Petty theft is against the law. All the same things that you and I are not allowed to do. People who are homeless are not allowed to do those things. And so we've got to make sure that we enforce those laws. But standing on the corner is legal for me, just as it's legal for a homeless person. So we're dealing with a difficult issue, and there's a reason that homelessness has been around for thousands of years, because people do feel compassion. Sometimes it's a good thing to feel compassion, and sometimes your compassion is just wasted, and people are going to take advantage of you. And I guess people are willing to take that risk and are compassionate even knowing that they're taking the risk that someone's taking advantage of them, because it does make you feel better. That's going to be a hard habit to break in Temecula, but all you're doing in those cases is perpetuating the homelessness. Because when you give money, I guarantee you, for people who choose to remain homeless, when you give money, you may as well be giving them drugs, or you may as well be giving them alcohol. In a lot of cases, they turn part of it into food. The rest is turned into drugs or alcohol, and it's just a sad fact. So that's going to be the most difficult part of the education process in Temecula, is please don't give money. If you want to give somebody some food, that's a little bit better than giving money. But again, by giving food, you're driving people away from those programs that can truly help them by providing food and training and counseling. So we want to be able to provide all of these things through the nonprofits who have training, and these people are trained to do this. They've been doing it for years. They're trained counselors and psychologists. They're medical personnel. They're trained in the fields of addiction and mental issues. So it's going to be, it's a long road. And certainly, we've thought we had the answers before. We thought that maybe the pantry was the answer. I have never met more compassionate people than the people who have worked at the pantry all these years. And you think you're doing the right thing when you're giving food and trying to keep people warm and trying to keep their stomachs full and trying to keep them healthy. And I hate to say, but they know that some people are taking advantage of them. But when your choices are to let them go hungry or to let them be cold at night, they're going to opt to give them food and give them a blanket to keep them warm. But we have a better solution, and the better solution is to give them a hand up and get them out of those conditions. For those who choose not to take advantage of those benefits and those opportunities, then they can live in the open, but they cannot continue to litter or urinate in public or do drugs or be publicly drunken or panhandle aggressively or any of the other things that are against the law, the same as it would be for you and I. So it's not going to be as comfortable as it has been in the past. So we've got to take a new course. And when things aren't working, we have to be the first to admit that things aren't working. And so if people want to come up and criticize us and say it hasn't worked, we're up here saying the same thing. It hasn't worked. We've got to take a new path. So, Mrs. Monroe, we agree with you, and here we are taking a new path. And I want one more comment. What was the result of some of the, we've done more than 30 surveys of the creek, or 30 helicopter surveys of the creek with law enforcement since Christmas. So just really quick, Chief, can you tell us what was the result, and then I'm going to call for the vote.
I don't have actual statistics on that, but typically what we're doing is we're going through and notifying them that they're not allowed to be in there, that they're trespassing, and letting them know a date that we're coming back to enforce trespassing, because we need legally to allow them to gather up their things and leave. There have been times when we go through and we find people with warrants or that are intoxicated or that are doing other criminal activity, and we take action on that. But typically it's to keep contacting them and see what they're doing. If they're doing anything illegal, then we take action. If not, we warn them about trespassing. If we have a trespass letter, we can arrest them for that. So.
And we are moving them out every time and warning them, and they do move out every time. And are we using the helicopter?
Correct.
Yes, and are we doing it with county flood
Correct, yeah.
Collaboration with county flood, because they actually have jurisdiction over the creek and we do not.
Correct.
So we cannot just go in on our own. And by law, we have to give them notice, and then we have to go back and move them out if they have chosen not to move.
Correct.
Okay, and we are going to continue to be aggressive in moving those people out of the creek, because number one, I can't sit here and allow them to live in inhumane conditions like that. And number two, it's dangerous for them, and, any other reason that you can think of. So we're going to continue with those stepped-up surveillances using the helicopter and partnering with Riverside County Flood Control.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And so I will call for the question. We have a motion and a second, so I'll cast your votes. And it is 4-0 with Councilmember Washington absent. Thank you, gentlemen, for an outstanding discussion. Thank you, Pastor Treadway, Team Pantry. We look forward to partnering with you, and we're going to address and tackle this problem as best we can, and I have high hopes, no pun intended. So thank you. All right. Any following reports? City manager, city attorney?
Nothing tonight?
Nothing tonight? Then I will accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And we stand adjourned. Thank you.